Welcome to the Smart City Kids Admissions Workshop. My name is Erica Papier, and as mentioned, I am the Nursery School Advisor and the Corporate Client Specialist at Smart City Kids. My other hat is that I'm the parent of a 3rd grade boy and a 7th grade girl. So I would love it if everyone could just take a moment and put in the chat how old your child is right now, or if you perhaps are expecting when that exciting day is going to happen. So I would love people just to take a second and put in the age of their child. That's funny, we're starting off 20 months and 20 months. So I just want to briefly introduce Smart City Kids so that you know we're here if you ever need us. But before I do that, I want to ask my colleague Adriana to introduce herself. She's going to be participating in the workshop today too.
Hi, thanks, Erica. Thank you all for having us here today. My name is Adriana Payne, and I'm also an educational advisor at Smart City Kids. My area of practice is really kindergarten through 12th grade, but in the nursery school domain, there are a few areas where Erica and I collaborate, particularly around public school. I am also the parent of 2 former nursery schoolers, one who's now a high schooler and one who's in college. And I have been at Smart City Kids for several years. Prior to that, I was an admissions director at a New York City school where I worked with families of children from sort of 18 months old to about 12, 13. And I also manage our day-to-day operations of our practice, of our firm, and we do placement for families at all the age groups mentioned before, nursery through college. We also have special needs services, and we work with relocating families as well, helping them find access to schools in New York City and actually around the country. So that's a little bit about me. Thanks, Erica.
Okay, great. So Adriana gave a little bit of an intro. I'll just fill in some other areas for the company. For the past 20 years, we've advised, as Adriana said, parents and students through admissions for every age, early childhood through college, including special education and boarding. So whatever age your child is, and I know this is in the future for all of you, we're here for you. We also have clients who are schools and support them with all areas of work, including leadership transitions, admissions, strategic planning, etc. And our corporate workshops cover parenting, education, and admissions, and we're very excited to be here today for you. And we also offer parenting sessions. Parenting is a complicated experience, and so we're here for families if they ever want to discuss admissions, education, etc. We also have a very experienced group of tutors. So there's Smart City Kids, and then there's also Smart City Tutors, if any of you have older children who might be in need of any support. So we're going to present and then take time for questions at the end. So if you have a burning question as we're going along, just go ahead and put it in the chat, and then we'll be sure to address it at the end. The other thing I want to mention before I forget, in case any of you have to leave early, we do offer discounts on our initial consultation appointment with families. We offer a 15% discount if a family is interested in a one-on-one session. So you can contact us directly for the code for that if need be. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, Adriana. So as mentioned, today is the nursery school workshop. We are going to primarily cover independent schools, but we're also going to touch on public schools in a bit. And we're going to go over resources to get you started, the whole timeline of the process down to when it finishes with certification. So that's our plan. And we're going to start off with private school admissions. So where to begin? The process officially starts in August of the year prior to your child starting school. So if you want your little one to start school in September 2023, this is a good time to start researching. Where should you research? So of course, we are an excellent opportunity to learn, and we have a website with some information. The Parents League of New York is a nonprofit. They host workshops, have school fairs, and have some excellent publications. I think some good websites for you to review are, it's a bit of alphabet soup with this admissions process. So a phrase you'll hear tossed around a lot is ISAGNY, which stands for the Independent Schools Admissions Association of Greater New York. ISAGNY has a very informative website, as does DECA, the Downtown Early Childhood Association, NYSES, and the National Association of Education of Young Children. So those are some good resources to get you started learning about the process and learning about schools. So when to start and what to do. Now is a great time to start. Spend the spring researching and compiling a list of schools. People always ask, how many should we apply to? It sort of depends on what neighborhood you live in, quite honestly, but I think a good safe start point is 6 to 8 schools. Doesn't mean you have to ultimately apply to that many. I think 6 is sort of a good number to apply to at the end of the day. The first thing I always encourage parents to keep in mind as they're researching is logistics. Imagine it is February, it is snowing, you have a super important meeting to get to at the office, and it's the day your toddler has decided he will not, under any circumstances, leave home unless he puts his own coat and snow boots on. So logistics, someplace that's easy to get to with a toddler, is very, very important. And I see Adriana smiling. We've both been there with toddlers. They go through fierce independent phases. And I think staying in a reasonable distance from home is really, really helpful. So that's the first thing to do is to think about logistics. I think another thing you can be thinking about as you're researching schools in the spring, schools have very different applications. Some are very basic, and the application just asks basic contact information, but usually they want you to write some short answers to questions about your child, your family, and what you're looking for in a school. And so it's a fun opportunity to just think about the answers to those questions, how you describe your child, what your values are, what traditions you value, what your priorities are, things that are important to you in a school search. So those are things that you can start thinking about and formulating thoughts around. Each school has a different process. So unfortunately, no two schools do this exactly the same way, which makes things just a little tricky sometimes. So I think it's really important that you just try to understand the process for the schools on your list. Make yourself a spreadsheet, keep yourself organized so you understand the admissions timeline and deadlines and requirements for each school. And if it applies to your family, there's a simultaneous financial aid process. So many, not all, but most preschools offer financial aid. And there's an application with supporting documents that you need to submit alongside your admissions application. So that's another process just to understand. Okay, so you're going to spend your spring now doing that research using those websites that we suggested. The process historically, it used to be for nursery school that everything started the day after Labor Day. That was the day. But now that everything is online, there isn't necessarily a universal day anymore. So when you're doing research, one thing to note on your spreadsheet is when do applications go live? So in the fall, in August, in early September, the applications will go live. Yes, they have an application deadline, but it's good just to go ahead and complete them and get them back in. So you will do that in August or early September. With COVID and the way that that has impacted the nursery school admissions process, it has been for the past, time of the pandemic, virtual. They've done virtual tours and open houses and family visits and et cetera, et cetera. It's looking like for this coming admission season, it will be a bit of a hybrid. So they're really trying hard to let you see the facility in person. Usually it's when the children are not there, since the under 5 population is not vaccinated yet. So they're really, really trying hard, but it's very likely that this coming admission season will be a hybrid of some in-person experiences and many virtual experiences. There's actually a real convenience of the virtual experience. Being able to do the tour virtually sometimes is very convenient, but they're trying really, really hard to let you see their building in person. So the process usually entails the steps of a tour of the school, either virtual or in person. Usually those are groups. You hear me emphasize usually because every school has a slight variation on the way they do the process. And the tours are an opportunity to learn about program, curriculum, philosophy, community, getting to know the leadership, getting to know faculty, sometimes current parents. Open houses and tours usually are during the day. Open houses usually fall in the evening, and schools, while they have many opportunities for tours, some schools don't do open houses. If they do, they might just have 1 or 2 for large groups of families. Usually that's an opportunity to really get to know their community, learn more about their program, ask questions. Open houses are often optional, and clients ask us all the time, do I have to go? It says it's optional. My take and opinion is yes. You're making an important decision for your family, and it's 2-pronged. One is it's just another point of contact with the school for you to learn about them and make sure it feels like the right fit for what you're looking for. And it also demonstrates to the school that you're interested in them and their program, and you're taking the time to get to know their school. Some preschools, they don't usually call it a parent interview. They call it a family meeting or a family visit. Essentially, it's a parent interview where they're taking the opportunity to get to know you as a family. Similar to the essays, they're going to be asking questions about your child, your family, and your school priorities and your school search. And then for child interviews, they don't call it interviews, they call it a visit. Pre-COVID, they were in person. During COVID, many schools either did a Zoom with the child or they asked parents for videos. And so that hybrid model looks like it will continue. So I could spend our whole hour together educating you about what is Montessori or what is Reggio Emilia, play-based, traditional, progressive. Many schools are a hybrid of different philosophies. I think the important thing to understand is that it's very different when you read about a school philosophy and you experience it at a visit of a school. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Schools will tweak philosophies, they'll cherry pick certain aspects of philosophies to incorporate. There is not one philosophy that's better than others. There's not one philosophy that if your goal is to enroll your child in a certain kindergarten, that they have to go to a certain kind of early childhood program. Again, I start with logistics, and I think that's where you start your school list. In terms of philosophies, I do think it's interesting if in your geographic radius, if you have Reggio schools, Montessori schools, progressive schools, it's interesting to educate yourself and learn about different philosophies. But if they all happen to be Reggio Emilia inspired schools, that's okay. I don't think there's one right way. Young children are very, very adaptable. It's also a lot about your comfort level, what feels right to you in terms of how these programs are going to educate your child. But if people have specific philosophy questions, I can have a separate conversation, and I'm very, very happy to go into lots of detail. So how do you know for your very, very young child? I just glanced at the chat, and I appreciate for those of you who put your child's age in the chat. If you didn't, please do. But I see 20 months, 6 months, 12 months. How do you know what is right for your very young child? It's definitely an art, not a science. I think there are certain things that are more objective in terms of assessing them for your family, and then there are certain things that are more subjective. So on the objective side, the school has their philosophy. They're very proud of their philosophy. They're very proud of their program and their curriculum. And it's important that you are in agreement with what you learn. They have a mission, and that's their big picture goal for your child and their family and your family. They have curriculum and obviously the location. Those are things that are sort of set. Things that are more subjective to think about: can you imagine when you're on a tour, can you imagine your very young person in the environment? Does it feel like a place where you'd be excited by what the teachers were working on with the children, the things you see on the walls, the materials, etc.? I think comfort with the administration and the faculty is very, very important. You are considering leaving your very, very little person in the care of these administrators, of these faculty members. And so you want to get a feeling as you're going through this process that they cherish children, that they just feel pure joy about working with young children. Believe me, it takes a special kind of person to be an educator for early childhood. They're special people. And so I think feeling the trust of those people is very, very important. Observations of the students. So when you look at the children, whether it's in a video or on a Zoom tour or in person potentially, what you notice about the kids in terms of how happy and engaged they are. I think another really important piece is the community of families, the parent body. You're going to spend a lot of time with this community. Going to go to school events, birthday parties, picnics in the park, et cetera, et cetera. Your child is going to spend a lot of time with these families. So you want to be in a place where you like the other parents, where you feel like they're people who you'd like your child to spend time with if they're at their house for play dates, birthday parties, et cetera. You'd maybe even like to go out to dinner with them on a Saturday night, that you feel very comfortable and you feel excited about the community of parents. And then, of course, do you feel comfortable with the facility? Some preschools live in a church, or they live in a synagogue, or they live in some other organization, like Third Street Music School has Third Street Preschool downtown. So you want to be comfortable with the facility. So how do you get into the school? Is the door open at arrival and dismissal? Is there a guard? Just how do you feel about the security? And I think one thing that's sort of a fun exercise is, if you can, at arrival or at dismissal, stroll by the school. It's a good way to see, like, who's at drop-off, who's at pickup, are the teachers outside, is there a guard outside? So it's a fun exercise. If you have time, you can just sort of take a stroll and see what drop-off and pickup look like. Okay. By the way, Adriana, please jump in. Adriana says many, many, many years. We've both been doing this for well over 20 years. So if I'm forgetting anything,
I will.
anything to add, please, please.
Okay.
Okay, so parent tours, either in person or virtual. I think like anything else, you want to be well educated before you join that Zoom or step in the building for the virtual, the in-person tour. Research from, as we say, vetted sources, the school's website, or some of the websites that we mentioned earlier, not disgruntled parent websites. You know, I worked at a school for 17 years, and there is always the school side of a disgruntled parent story. So we just caution you to do your research carefully. When you're doing a tour, make sure you get the name of the tour guide for thank you notes. Make sure that, you know, you note how you're feeling. I think the objective things you can find on their website, but I think after the tour is finished, not during, but after, take notes on how you felt. Because if you're applying to 6 schools, it will start to get a little fuzzy how exactly you felt about what. So I think a really good exercise after the tour is to take some notes about your oh wow moments. What got you excited? Why can you see your child in this environment? Why, as a parent, would you like to join that community? Those things will be helpful to you to have specifics for your correspondences when you write to thank the schools, if you have a parent interview. So I think do yourself a favor and take some notes after the tour, not during, but after. So if you have an interview, if you have a family meeting, again, like with the tour, you want to be a well-informed participant. I think my favorite story is one of my colleagues shared a story with me that at a parent interview, and this was for a kindergarten family because there are no all girls or all boys preschools. The father asked his interviewer, why were there no boys? Why did I not see any boys on the day of my school tour? It's like, well, it's an all-girls school. The father just did absolutely no research. He didn't know anything. That's obviously an extreme example, but come informed about the school, about the philosophy, about the community, and have answers, what you're looking for, why you like the school. And I think if you're asked to describe your child, anecdotes are much more interesting and fun than lists. So rather than saying, Adriana is, insert list of adjectives here, it's much more helpful to have little stories that explain who your child is and think about their cognitive development, their social emotional development, and their physical development. And if you're asked to describe your child, you want to be thoughtful and thorough and not just go to, well, he already knows his alphabet and he reads, 20 books a week. You're going to raise red flags if you come across as overly focused on those kinds of things with such a very, very, very young child. So that's something I think to be aware of.
I just want to underscore that in an early childhood admissions process, the child's pre-academic skills are probably the least important part of the entire profile. And so I know that might be counterintuitive for many, but the brain development that happens from 0 to 5 is so extraordinary. And what early childhood educators are looking at is how the child is developing holistically. So, ultimately, don't worry about counting and alphabet. That's something preschool will do in partnership with you, but there's no need to impress them in the interview. The interview is just, here's a snippet of our delightful child who makes us say, I'm so lucky to be their parent. They're looking for a little authenticity.
Thank you. Yeah, very good points. So the child Zooms / videos / potentially in person, this is probably the most nerve-wracking part because toddlers are wildly unpredictable little humans. If there is a video, if you're asked for videos of your child, definitely you have to stick with the time limit. Don't attempt to give them more. They're asking for a certain amount for a reason. And they should hear your voice as little as possible. You don't want to be prompting your child. They should hear you as little as possible. It should be as much about the child as possible. And again, like with what you're writing or like with what you're describing in the interview, try to think about the different areas of their development. So cognitive, social, emotional, and physical. I think it's helpful to, if the video prompt is very broad and open-ended, just try to give them a sense of the different areas of your child's development. If it's a Zoom, educators of young children are very aware that, Zoom is a very tricky format for young children. So they're very, very understanding of anything that might happen on the Zoom. But again, you want to follow the lead of the person leading the Zoom and resist the urge to answer for your child. That goes whether you're in person or on Zoom. The person is not testing your very young child. They're just trying to get to know developmentally with various areas of development, where do they fall in this range of what's age appropriate? And so they know the answers to the questions they're asking. They're just trying to engage your child. They're not trying to test. So do your best, bite your tongue, be quiet, let your child answer. If they don't answer, it's okay. And before you have a Zoom or before you have an in-person visit, don't give them too much notice because they have no sense of time. But that morning, and yes, I'm going to talk to you like you're a toddler now, but you can say to your little one, guess what? We're going to do something super fun today. If it's a Zoom, you can say, you're going to get to meet my friend Adriana on Zoom, and we're going to play for a couple of minutes. And if it's in person, you can say, we're going to get to go meet my friend Adriana. She's really nice and she's got fun things to play with. That's it. Not, this is very important to mommy. You have to be a good girl. They're going to do what they're going to do. They're toddlers. So you just want to be very excited so that they understand from you that it's something fun and safe that they're going to be experiencing, and have a sense of humor. Young toddlers are unpredictable. I mean, gosh, the crazy stories I could tell you that my clients have told me, things their kids have done during these Zooms or during these play visits in person. You just have to have a sense of humor and roll with it and follow the educator. So if you are doing something in person, follow the lead of the educator at the school. So just follow directions from what they want for you, not just from your child. Okay, so correspondences. It's helpful for the schools to know if you're interested in their program for your child and for your family. You don't want to thank them every single time. There is such a thing as too much. You can overdo it. My take is if you correspond with them twice, it's very appropriate at the early childhood level. So one is a thank you. After you finish your appointments. You thank them. My motto for these is genuine and specific. You go back to your notes that you took after you had your tours, and you tell them why the program and curriculum and etc. philosophy, why you think that's a great fit for your child and why it's a good fit for you as a family. And specific examples go a long way. Things that are very generic, thanks so much for all the wonderful interactions with your school, they're useless. So it's nice to thank them. Via email, I think pre-COVID, I would have said actually send a real note, but with COVID, I think email is probably safer. Just never know when people are going to be in and out of school. And then at the end of the process, there may be a school that rose to the top for you. So there may be a school that you just fell in love with everything about it, and you know that if the school offers your family a place, you will definitely take it. We call that a first choice letter. You can write to the school and very directly say that for reasons X, Y, and Z, that their school is your first choice. And if you are so fortunate to be offered a place for your child, you would enthusiastically accept the place. So you can very directly tell them that. That's at the end of the process. This all happens starting, as I said, in August, early September, and usually you're notified sometime every year. It's a little bit differently, but usually for early childhood, it's late February. This past year was a very odd year with admissions timelines, but we'll see what happens going forward. So at the end of the process, you can write the first choice letter to the other schools on your list. So if you applied to 6, you can send one first choice letter, and then you can send the other 5, we call them love letters. All the reasons that you love their school, you're just not committing. You're just not saying first choice. We're asked a lot about recommendation letters. If you know a family at a school on your list, or if you know a board member, once you know how you feel about that school, and if you think that the person you know is well liked and well regarded in the community, then it's okay to have them reach out to the admissions committee for you. I think it's really important to be careful who you associate yourself with. So if the person writing the letter in general out in the world is a well-liked person, chances are they're a well-regarded community member at the school. However, if the person is more difficult in some way out in the world, whether it's in the office or if it's just a friend of yours, you might want to think twice if you're associating yourself with someone who potentially might be seen as difficult in the preschool community. And wait until you know how you feel about the school before you ask that person. So don't have them write it in the fall. Wait until the winter, wait until, December, early January. And then if you love their school, especially if it's your first choice, then I think it's appropriate to have them contact the admissions office on your family's behalf and write a letter. Okay, so decisions. There are 3 outcomes. You can be offered a place for your child can be put on a wait list, or there can be a regret. A regret is final. Mourn it briefly and move on. Don't call and ask them why. A wait list means that you could have done everything in a really lovely and thoughtful way, but they had a very skewed applicant pool for one gender or the other. They had too many siblings or legacies, things that are completely out of your control. And if it's a school that you're very interested in, you can reach out to the admissions office, say, thank you so much. We are very interested in being on the wait list for your school. What are our next steps? When would you like us to reach out to you next? Would it be more convenient email or phone call? And then listen to what they say and follow their directions accordingly. If you are accepted at multiple schools, release the spots of the schools that you're not going to be attending in a very timely way so that the schools can go to their wait list. And when you select this school for your child, you're going to sign a enrollment contract and give the school a non-refundable deposit. The deposit is non-refundable, and it is usually several $1,000s. Read carefully the contract that you sign, please, so that you know what you're committing to. And then tell the other schools that you were accepted to, you've accepted a place at another program. Tell the schools you were waitlisted at, you no longer need to be on their wait list. I will leave you, I believe this is the last slide for me before we turn it over to Adriana. I will leave you with this thought. The majority of the preschool admissions process is about the parents. The vast majority is about the parents. They can handle your child. They are early childhood educators. Whatever happens with your child, they can handle it. But what they are extremely cautious of are parents, because parents can be wonderful, collaborative, fantastic additions to a school community, or they can be toxic. So if you write anything in your application essay, if you say anything during a Zoom, if you are inappropriate in any way, if you make it seem in any way like you're going to be difficult, they're going to move right on to the next family. So you want to be, if you remember nothing else from the past 40 minutes, you want to be your smiliest, most respectful, warmest self. You all work for a law firm that, big, intense place. Get out of that mindset when you're going through this process and get into the preschool mindset, where it's warm and loving and nurturing and wonderful. So smile and be kind. It will go a very, very, very long way.
That's excellent advice, Erica. Yeah, I've definitely seen in my day parents blow it a few times, even when things happened pre-COVID, when we used to have small play groups of, 4 2 or 3 year olds coming in, and somebody bit somebody else. That was never a deal breaker for the child. It was how the parent handled it. So that's an excellent point. Okay, so we're
Adriana, just let me tell you, there is a question in I'll pose it to you after, actually, the public school question in the Q&A.
Yep, I saw. So we're going to talk about public schools right now. And just to be clear, we're talking about public preschool programs. So that does not include public kindergarten programs. I know there was a question regarding Hunter and G&T. Those programs are for kindergarten. So the information I'm going to give you today, similar to what Erica shared, it's some resources. Again, we very much advise you to stick to vetted resources. What do we mean by that? Well, the DOE website, that's a great resource, but it's incredibly dense. I also there's a website called Inside Schools. It's run by educators, really thoughtful information on individual programs. There's a newsletter you can subscribe to if you are going to pursue public schools, called Chalkbeat, and there's a New York edition. And then the DOE also has their own newsletter called the Morning Bell. So I would start with these resources, and if there are particular programs you're aware of, you can always dig down and I'll tell you how to do that. The information we're sharing today is as of this year. The DOE has not outlined what they will do next year, nor will they before the fall. They take their own sweet time. But I'm giving you the information for today because we can estimate that it will be similar. So every child who's a resident of New York City has a zone. And you can see Manhattan is circled here. We've got Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. Every child who is a New York City resident is eligible for a seat. Starting at 4, There is also a 3K program, but it is not as widely available as the UPK program. And then, of course, every child is eligible for kindergarten. So, the Department of Education looks at children's birthdays differently than some other programs, particularly privately run schools. Some of that has to do with compliance. Some of it has to do with, if it's under 2, it's not a school, it's a nursery daycare center. If it's over 5, it's a school. So there are compliance definitions that come into play. But typically, the DOE will always operate, when I say DOE, it's Department of Education, that your child is eligible for a spot if they turn the age they need to be on or by December 31st of the entry year. So if I had a child for whom I was applying for UPK, so that's 4-year-olds, they must turn 4 before December 31st, 2022 to be eligible for this September. Okay, so what we're estimating for next fall's process, so when I say that, I mean entry for fall 23, is children who are born in 2019 will be able to apply for a UPK spot. I am estimating that the deadline is going to be March 18th for the UPK application. I pulled that estimate from this year's deadline, which was March 18th. Last year's deadline was March 15th. One of the things the DOE does very differently than other types of schools is they're never going to tell you the exact date up front. Independent schools will, public schools will not. They will refer to a season, and then as they get closer into the season, they'll give you a month perhaps, and about a week out, they usually tell you the date. So what I mean by that is if they say applications will become available in the winter, they'll leave it open-ended. Then as you get into the winter, they may say applications are available in January. And then about a week before, they'll say January 15th, the UPK application goes live. The deadline is March 18th. There was a question in the chat before about, and this related to private schools, I believe, but it's important to address it. If we wait till the last day, will we be able to get an appointment? Something along those lines. For private schools, I would not advise you do that. I would say get your application in when you're ready. We have seen many families who say, but the deadline was this, but honestly, they can only process so many applications in a cycle. So you are at risk if you don't get your application in early. Public schools are the opposite. There is no benefit to getting your application in, if it becomes open January 15th or March 18th. It's all the same. There's no first come, first serve priority there. So you should know that.
Adriana, before you move on, I just want to mention also that for private schools, because some of them are so inundated with applications, they do a lottery before you can even apply. That mostly I've seen with downtown schools. First, you have to clear their lottery, then you get an application. That's some schools' way of controlling numbers. But I agree wholeheartedly with Adriana. Do not wait.
So this past year, so meaning for entry in fall 2022, the deadline was a couple weeks ago. Notification will be in May. See, we have the month, but we don't have the day. About a week out, we'll know when we're going to be notified. If you subscribe to Chalkbeat or Morning Bell, you may want to subscribe to both. They will tell you, it will blitz right to your inbox. And then after getting your notification, you pre-register your child. I also shared information about 3K, which is a much smaller program than UPK. UPK stands for Universal Pre-K, and that was Mayor de Blasio's huge initiative and has really changed the landscape of early childhood education in the city. 3K is a much smaller program right now. There certainly has been a an objective of making quality early childhood education available very broadly in New York City, but it's still being rolled out. I do want to share, and you'll see right now the 3K applications are due in mid-April. So I'm estimating next year they will also be due in mid-April. I'm going to talk to you about how you apply for these programs, but I do also want to let you know there are a couple different ways. You can do it online, you can call, and you can visit something called the Family Welcome Center, which there are family welcome centers for each district. So how are you going to pick your schools? First, you're going to see what programs are available to you. My suggestion is you start with something like Inside Schools. It's a little more navigable than the very dense DOE website. You're going to research programs. You can sign up for tours, look at via the school website, just what they offer. If there's a particular pedagogy or style of teaching they embrace. And then on the DOE website, you can look something up called the School Quality Snapshot, which is really helpful. But I suggest you go to that place after you've got a few programs in mind. I also suggest you are only listing programs where you would gladly send your child. Families ask me, and this is a particular issue at older grades, at high school, at middle school, at kindergarten, if you're allowed to apply to up to 12 schools, must you list 12 schools? No, you list as many schools as you would consider for your child. What happens if you miss the deadline? Reach out to the Family Welcome Center and they will help you. You can even call 311 and they will help you. My Schools essentially is the application. It's a portal on the DOE website. So you register a My Schools account and that's how you would submit an application. Once you get your notification and you're looking to enroll your child, you have to bring verification of their identity, of your residence. And so you typically would bring health records, a birth certificate, proof of residency, which could be a utilities bill, and proof, could again come from the birth certificate that you are the parent or guardian of the child. I think that it's very important for parents to feel like, just as Erica described, logistics, an affinity for a program, all those things are really important. You're just going to have slightly less choice in the matter when you're looking at public schools, only because, as I said, for 3-year-olds, there are just fewer programs. And for UPK classrooms, there's a lot of movement year over year over where UPK classrooms are. Many public schools that are K-5 schools have a UPK class or two. And if a student gets a spot, they will then have a priority in the kindergarten admissions, but it doesn't typically mean they're guaranteed kindergarten admissions. So, if you live in an area with a really fine zone school, it probably makes sense for you to do the application for the pre-K program if that's where you want your child to go to kindergarten. So these are just, a few, very broad tips. But the one thing I want you to remember, just as much with the public schools as with private, you're still, take the time to develop a sense of what the program is. Who are the teachers? Do they like the principal? These are all things you can learn, but stick with the vetted sources. And the credentials of a site like Inside Schools are really unimpeachable. So I really, really strongly recommend you stick to a place like that. And I know we had a couple of other questions. There was a question in the chat about older children, middle school, and if there was an IEP. We certainly work with middle schoolers. We certainly work with children from charter programs. We certainly work with many children with IEPs. So that's absolutely within our scope. And then there was a question about G&T and Hunter. Again, those are kindergarten processes. And right now, G&T is extremely opaque. Mayor Adams has declared he's a proponent of G&T. Mayor de Blasio was not. So it's been morphing into something called Brilliant NYC, but the process is very different than it used to be. There used to be a series of testing. That has not occurred for the last 2 years. And I can't tell you what it's going to look like next year. So that's very much, if it's a process you're interested in, make sure you're signed up to those daily newsletters, because they will keep you really very much on top of the public school process for both screen schools like a Hunter, as well as G&T or Brilliant NYC program.
Okay. There was another question. Thanks, Adriana. There was another question in the chat. Specific advice for applying to private threes program for a child who has a summer birthday and missed cutoffs for the twos program. My main advice would be to lengthen your school list a tiny bit and just find out from the schools that you're interested in their threes program if they tend to enroll a lot of new families at the threes program.
I think that's great advice. And I think also remember that while twos is typically a bigger entry point, that means that while there may be less spots for threes, there also tend to be fewer applicants. So, you know, it shouldn't feel terribly limiting, but you might want to add another school or two to the list.
So with just a couple of minutes left, sorry we didn't leave more time for questions, but there's so much to share. Are there things people can either put in the Q&A or you can put in the chat? I know we gave you a lot to consider, and we're happy to answer any questions at this point.
I would just say enjoy your children. This is such a special period of life, and while it can feel very stressful, you know, we are lucky as New Yorkers because we have such wonderful schools. And if you're relaxed about it, they'll be relaxed about it. Even, you know, tiny little children who are nonverbal yet, they read the room. So just enjoy them, and schools will sense that from you.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. And the other thing I would say is, you know, what makes this process a little complicated, again, is no two school is exactly the same. So even, for example, the age your child has to be to start at the program is different from school to school. They're very specific about how old they want your child to be. So just find a system to keep yourself organized. Think of this like a big project. This is a project like any other project you have. It has a beginning, a middle, and it does have an end. So I wholeheartedly echo what Adriana said in terms of just enjoy your children. And it's an exciting process because you have an opportunity to really learn about these different options and opportunities that you have. Okay, looks like there is another question in the chat.
Yeah, there was a question about lotteries. When do schools start their lotteries? And it's a little quirky. So when you're doing your research in the spring, you will certainly be able to glean who's a lottery school and who isn't. Make a note of that, put a little reminder in your calendar. But there are some schools who make their lottery available, you know, the third week of September, which is extremely arbitrary, but you just have to look at the list of schools and follow the instructions they set out for you.
Another question, what if your child doesn't get into any of the schools you applied to? Is there a fallback post-application deadline? So there often is a second round of admissions at schools. So if it didn't work out and you weren't offered a place at one of your preferred schools, you can, one, ask the schools if you were waitlisted to stay on their active spring summer waitlist. Things happen. things change, and it could be that you're offered a place off of a wait list in the spring or maybe even in the summer. But then you absolutely can call other schools and find out if they have any openings. And at the end of the day, something will work out. If you apply wisely from the beginning, and I'm more than happy to chat with you and help you come up with a school list, then it should be okay. All right, we've got about 2 minutes left. Any other questions? I think we've covered the ones in the chat. Well, again, thank you so much to Weil for inviting us to speak today. And as Liz mentioned, there will be several other admissions workshops for older students. So if you're curious to get some advance notice, certainly attend those and encourage your colleagues to attend those. We're here if you need us for admissions guidance or for parenting work. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck with the admissions process.
Thank you.